In this lesson, we are going to give some information about needs of people with disabilities when moving abroad, particularly in insecure context. When organizing a mobility abroad, people with disability should previously consider three main aspects that may have a strong impact on their experience. First, beliefs, attitudes, and behavior toward disabilities in different countries. Second, physical environment in relation with disabilities. And third, facilitation and services available in different countries. Under the term people with disability, usually we refer to two main types of limitation. First, physical disability, which impact on mobility capacity and functioning. And second, sensory disabilities such as blindness and deafness. People can also have different level of severity, which in turn means different need and level of assistance and facilitations. We will present now the main barriers and facilitators related to culture, to physical environment, and to social environment, which represent the most important challenges for a person with disability when moving abroad. Let's start with the beliefs, attitudes, and behaviors toward people with disabilities across cultures. Awareness about rights of people with disabilities is growing after the United Nations Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities had been declared in 2006, and many countries signed it. Nevertheless, people with disabilities should be aware that culture influences beliefs, attitudes, and behavior towards them. In some cultures, and above all in rural or poor contexts, the cause of disability can be attributed to internal factors as well as to external, and can lead to harmful beliefs toward disability. Factors involved, as reported by a report of the United Nations, can relate to lack of awareness and understanding of the cause of the disability, misconception regarding the cause, reinforcement of negative attitudes, stigma and prejudice by media, laws, and policy. For example, in some cultures, the cause of disability can include violation of community laws or norms, or are seen as consequences of family violation. These factors can vary according to different contexts, urban versus rural, or different levels of education, low versus high. These cultural beliefs can lead to practices and approaches which are not friendly or facilitating, and also influence social environment in terms of attitudes, behaviors, and relationship, leading to inclusion as well as to isolation and marginalization of people with disabilities. In some countries, the attitudes toward different disabilities can differ. For example, in Egypt, blind people are differently considered since a famous Egyptian writer and poet, Taha Hussein, as well rector of the University of Alexandria and Ministry of Education in 1950, promoted the change of knowledge and awareness about the capacities of people with blindness and facilitate their inclusion in the job market as well as in the education system. On the other hand, these effects had not the same impact on the inclusion of people with other types of disabilities, such as physical or other sensory limitations. Based on these differences, people with disabilities should be aware that the other can feel easy when they interact with them, but they can also feel uneasy due to the feeling of fear or shame or rejection. Let's now move to physical environment in relation with disabilities. The physical environment is an important issue in promoting autonomy of people with both physical and sensory disabilities. The physical barriers at both public and private level are one of the most frequent aspects you need to deal with. Even if in most of the countries the awareness that physical barriers should be removed, there is still a lot of work to do. This aspect is related to level of investment allocated for as well to norms and laws. Usually, in the largest cities, the principal areas are provided with facilitators for physical mobility, while peripheral areas and rural are less. Also, building can present both solutions for mobility as well as barriers, both sensory and physical. For example, assistance for disabled is available at most of the international airports around the world, but when you start moving outside airport, you can face different limitations, such as absence of car for transfer adapted for wheelchair transport, or the accessibility of roads and buildings for the presence of barriers. To face this limitation, people need to prepare a plan and to ask previously for support for the facilitation needed as well as for assistance. Regarding services for people with disabilities, availability and type of services offered is very different around the world. In Europe as well as in North America and Australia, the service provision for people with disabilities is usually available and often offered through public services. It is, however, important to check about their costs and type of insurance needed. The usual travel insurance doesn't cover special needs for assistance and transport, and it is necessary to check at local level which are offered by public and the one available from private or non-profit organizations. In low and middle income countries, the service availability and provision can vary enormously from being available to being completely absent. Moreover, these services are often provided only on a private basis without any type of public role or support. This diverse situation requires, therefore, a careful planning. The university services for disabled students or for international student mobility, usually available in high middle income countries, and few universities in low income countries, have some knowledge and experience in supporting travel for disabled students. The same offices can support students in checking for dedicated fundings available through governmental agency for student support, as well as national or European funding. For instance, the Erasmus Student Network offers information about support opportunities for students with disabilities. To sum up, norms and laws about access of people with disabilities to the job market or to the education system are widely different among countries. The type of barriers consist mainly in the absence of norms that promote accessibility rather than in those that discriminate on. Frequently, accessibility is also limited by attitudes and beliefs as well as by norms. As mentioned before, there is a growing interest and more efforts are undergoing to promote rights of people with disabilities in the access to education and work. For example, while in Europe the accessibility to job market and to education is supported and promoted, in other countries they are starting now to implement services about. So, to conclude, when choosing a destination, people with disabilities should check which kind of initiatives had been developed or undertaken to support their participation and integration in the host country, in order to be aware of the kind of support they may receive and the challenges they will face. In many universities in low and middle income countries, there are not dedicated services, so you will need to check with your host university how they can support you during your mobility and gather information about accessibility and usability of their context.